Shamit, we were waiting for you. What can I say? Okay. So let's move straight into the Parsha, which is called Eikev. And Eikev is a heel of the body. It's not the direct translation of it, but it's one of the meanings of the word. So the Parsha starts off Vahaya, and it should be Eikev Tishma'un, and it should be for the sake of or because of your listening to all these mitzvahs and performing all these mitzvahs that Hashem has given to you. But the commentators say that this word Eikev, because of your listening, and it should be because of or for the sake of your listening, they say that word Eikev actually means the heel. And then they talk about the fact that we've said already that this week's Parsha is part of the monologue that Moshe Rabbeinu is having with all the Bnei Israel, and he's standing on the border on the one side of the Jordan River, and he's giving this 36-day monologue about when you go into the land of Israel, you should try and remember all the mitzvahs and all the commandments. But it says, Vahaya Eikev Tishma'un. And the commentators say that this listening, first of all, there's one of the explanations is that even the mitzvahs that you would usually stand on or trample with your heel, even those you should listen to. But there's another explanation that these mitzvahs should penetrate not just your mind, your consciousness, not just your hearts, your emotions, but even right down into your body. And not only your body, but to the lowest part of all of your body, and to the densest, in a way, the heel is a very dense bone part, a very lowly part. And that all of these Torah ideas should penetrate all the way down, right to your feet, to the heels of your feet. So that's just one of the ways of regarding, and then because it's the name of this week's Parsha, it's kind of sets the theme that all of the conversations that Moshe is having, or this monologue, is really to help everybody integrate and to get all of the story of what happened to the Jews for the last 40 years. And once again, he's repeating the whole story. You came out of Egypt, all these things happened. So he's going on and talking about that. So just to go to the word Vahaya, which is the opening word of the whole Parsha. We know one of the names of Hashem is, it's a very interesting name. Hashem's name is, and it was, it is, and it will be. A continuous present. So Haya, Hoveh, V'yihiyeh. And they all of those words are kind of different formations of the letters Hey, Yud, Hey. And now it says V'haya, and it will be, because of your listening to all these commandments. And the commentator said that whenever there's a V'haya and it should be, there's actually a hint that it's going to be good, that something good is going to come from anything that starts with that wording V'haya, and it should be. And if you're interested in grammar, it's a kind of cute little thing to look into and see, why does it mean when you say V'haya that it's going to be something positive? So it says, basically this form, V'haya, appears with the conversive Va. This Va is a linking word that means and. So when you put and in front of this verb of it will be, it turns the past into future, as if when experiencing happiness, we hope for the past to spill over into the future. So v'haya, and it was, but because of the va, and it should be continuous forward into the future. I know that's a little technical, but it's interesting to note that whenever this word v'haya and it will be, it's always referring to something positive. But then the Torah commentators say, and not only just something positive, but often something positive dealing with the land of Israel. And it so happens that in this week's Torah monologue, the Parsha is really this continuation of this monologue, this 36-day monologue that Moshe was speaking to the people. There's a lot of information about the land of Israel and how special the land of Israel is. And of course, the whole journey of the people coming out of Egypt is for the sake of coming into the land of Israel. But it's interesting that in this, first of all, whenever it says Vahaya, it's a positive thing. It's mentioned 3 times. We have 3 different moments in the Torah when it starts with Vahaya, and then it's something to do with the land of Israel. And then the Chumash actually tells us a lot of very beautiful things about the land of Israel. But before we get into the land of Israel, there's so many things in this monologue that Moshe is saying, and they're very poetic, really. And I'll just read it a little bit before the part of the land of Israel comes up, because the whole thing is very clear. It's not esoteric. It's not hard to understand, but it just, Moshe is saying, you should remember the whole road that Hashem has led you on for these 40 years to test you, to know what's in your heart, whether you would observe these commandments. And he afflicted you, and he let you become hungry, and then he fed you with manna, something that you didn't know and your forefathers didn't know. And he did that in order, and he has this famous verse, in order to let you know that not by bread alone does man live, rather by what emanates from the mouth of Hashem does man live. So before we get into the Eretz Yisroel piece, and there's a lot of other little gems that I skipped over, but this piece of not by bread alone does man live, and we know that the manna, man, is related to the word for faith, imuna. And we've spoken about this before, that the whole concept of man is that you would have to trust that even though you're not planting, reaping, doing agriculture, that Hashem is going to provide for you. And so that's like a training that even when you are planting, reaping, harvesting, you should still know that everything you get is by Hashem's blessing. But he makes it specific here. You should know not by bread alone does man live, but what comes from the mouth of Hashem. And then Moshe reminds us that while they were wandering for the 40 years, your garments didn't wear out and your feet didn't swell. It's amazing, right? They were hiking for 40 years, no swollen feet, no blisters. They didn't have to change their hiking boots. You should know in your heart that just as a father will chastise his son, Hashem chastises you so that you will go in the way of Hashem. And now it starts this part, this wording about Eretz Yisroel, the special land of Israel. And it says, for Hashem is bringing you to a good land, a land with streams of water, of springs and underground water coming forth in valley and mountain. And then he says, a land of wheat, barley, grape, fig, pomegranate, a land of oil, olives, and honey. And first of all, those are the 7 special fruits of the land of Israel. And there's a lot of meaning and symbolism in those different fruits. And the honey is from the dates. And it carries on, a land where you will eat bread without poverty you will lack nothing there. And in Hebrew, that wording that you will lack nothing there, in Hebrew, lo techasar kol. You won't lack for anything in it. Lo techasar will not be lacking to you, really. Kol, anything. So this is, and then it carries on. Before I'll just finish the paragraph. A land whose stones are iron, and from whose mountains you will mine copper. You will eat and you will be satisfied, and you will bless Hashem your God for the good land that he gave you. So we know that that part is in the what we say after eating in the Birkat HaMazon. So this thing of lo techasar kol, there will not be anything lacking to you. So it's an interesting, there's, it's reminiscent of deeper things, as all the verses in the Torah are. And it reminds us of when we were talking about Moshe last week, that he wanted very much to go into the land of Israel. And the land of Israel is connected to not just a beautiful land that is physically blessed with beautiful fruit and all these 7 special species, but it's connected to the 50th level of understanding. So there's an idea that there's 50 levels, 50 gates of understanding. And Moses, as a high soul, that from the moment he was born, even though he was born prematurely, he was born at 7 months, from the moment he was born, it says the room filled with light, and he was this special soul that was able to bring down all of Torah. But it says that still he was only able, there is such a thing of 50 levels of understanding. And these 50 levels of understanding are corresponding to the concept of Bina, a certain level of comprehensive understanding. And Moshe reached the level of 49, apparently. And Eretz Yisroel itself is connected to 50, the 50 levels of understanding. How do we know this? Well, first of all, when it says kol, that lo techasar kol ba, that everything is in it, this word kol, I think, is also connected to 50, that everything is in it, but it's also this place where a person, I'm not sure it means that everybody in the land reaches this level, but Moshe Rabbeinu was very, wanted very much to go in so he could access this 50th level. So if we go back to why, in fact, he wasn't allowed in, and we spoke last week and we said he pleaded, last week's story was called Ve'et Hanan, and he pleaded, and we said he prayed 515 times to go in, but he was refused. So we spoke about the different things that he did wrong, and I don't even feel like going into it now, but one of the things is that why he wanted to go, he wanted to reach this 50th level. There's something special in this 50th level that connected to kol, lo techasar kol, there's nothing missing in it, that when Esav and Jacob, Yaakov and Esav, or Jacob and Esau, when they met each other, Esav said, I have everything. I have much. I have an abundance. And Yaakov said, I have kol. I have everything. There's something about a completeness that the land offers us that if we can access it, this is this special land. And it's not just a land in physical aspects, but in a kind of a spiritual aspect. One of the things about the land, and it says it also in this week's Parsha, is that the land is not like Egypt. It's not like Egypt because Egypt is, and this is also mentioned in the Parsha, Egypt is where you would plant your seed and water it by your foot like a vegetable garden. But the land to which you're crossing over to take possession of is the land of mountains and valleys, and by the rain of the heavens, it gets its water. So this is, and then it says, a land that Hashem your God seeks out, the eyes of Hashem your God are always upon it from the beginning of the year to the year's end. Now this is very profound difference between the land of Israel and the land of Egypt, but it also implying not just the land of Egypt, but many other countries that are not Eretz Yisroel. And Egypt becomes the symbol of what those other countries are. So what happened in Egypt with the rain? Why is it such a big deal? Because there's a lot about rain, and we have a lot of tradition about rain, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But in Eretz Yisrael, first of all, let's say in Egypt, they didn't nurture their produce from rain at all. What happened is that the Nile River would get very swollen and full, and they would direct the water from the Nile and direct it by channels into all their different fields, and that's how they would do agriculture. Not so in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, when the rainy season comes, it's coming from above, from God, and we know in Torah that if the people are deserving, the rain falls, and if the people are undeserving, the rain doesn't fall. So in Egypt, there's a seasonal aspect to the Nile swelling and nourishing all the crops. But in Eretz Yisrael, it's a much more, if Hashem wants, there's rain. If he doesn't want, he withholds the rain. And there's a whole tractate in the Gemara called Ta'anit, which is fast, different fast, because if the people are not deserving, then they have to fast. And rain is a blessing, and it's either given or it's withheld. So what this means is that the relationship of the people in Israel to Hashem is much more dependent on God's kindness and grace for that rain to come, because it's not a given, and we are constantly dependent on that rain in a way that the Egyptians weren't. The Egyptians could be kind of worldly in their relationship to agriculture, whereas we constantly have to be plugged in and praying for that rain that can either come down or not. So it's interesting that at the end of so before I go on to the end, I'll just say we were talking at this, just to go back a little bit. Okay, so why is rain such a special thing? And it actually connects in a way to the purpose of all of our life, in a way, that Geshem, that's what the word in Hebrew for rain is, Geshem. And the word for Gashmiut the word for materiality is Gashmiut, which has the same root as Geshem. And Geshem falls from above down. And so all of our materiality, the rain symbolizes, in a way, not just the blessing of rain that comes from God, but in a way it's a perfect metaphor for all of our material blessing, because it comes from above down to below. And it's very interesting because half of the year, we make a blessing, Mashiv Haruach, sorry, I need to get let me look at a siddur, but halfway through the year, we blessing on the dew that comes up from the ground, and we make reference to the wind, which is ruach. We make reference to the wind. And ruchniot is spirituality. It's connected to the wind. But after the holidays, after the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot holidays, we switch this blessing and we start asking very specifically for rain. So there's a story from the Baal Shem Tov, and the story is told that at the end of the holidays, the Baal Shem Tov would kind of wave his hands, and he would, in a way, push off the Mashiv Haruach, that Hashem is making the wind to blow, and he would pull in Umarid HaGeshem, he would pull in with his hand, like beckoning in the materiality, the abundance, the bringing the blessings from Hashem down, and bringing that manifestation of Hashem's blessing down, and also saying that all the davening and all the prayers of the high holidays, so it's enough of that, let's get down and let's bring the mitzvot, let's bring the action, let's bring everything down back into the feet, so to speak, the legs, the heels, like what we said at the beginning of class. So it's interesting talking about this, bringing, you know, the blessings down into the feet, into the heel, into the physicality. Just to tell you something cute about the 7 species of Eretz Yisroel, they correspond to different qualities, different aspects of godliness, and wheat is wisdom, barley is understanding, knowledge is the grapes, the fig is connected to Netzach, the pomegranate to Hod. Netzach is determination, Hod is sort of acknowledgement, humility. The olive is Yesod. And interesting enough, the Tamar, the date, is Malchut. And this is what's, when the Torah talks about honey, it really means date honey. And the gematria, the numerical value of a date, is 640. And the gematria of sunshine, Shemesh, is 640. And this is like the sweetness from the sun is completely filled the date. And it says, Tzaddik katama yifrach. The tzaddik is like a date palm that's going to be fruitful. And just a beautiful image of tzaddikim that are transferring divine light into the energy that fuels their life, just like the date palm is kind of imbibing all of this sunlight and becoming totally sweet. The tzaddik takes in the divine light, and what does the tzaddik do? His contribution to the world, in a way, his contribution to his understanding makes a contribution to the world, which is takat hadinim. What does that mean? It's the sweetening of the judgments. So what is it? How do we sweeten the judgments? How do we transform the struggles into opportunities? And so maybe, Suri, this can go back to what we were talking about before, that if we think about the tzaddikim like the dates, and the date out of all the Sheva Minim, the date is what's called, comes from the honey, and the tzaddikim, tzaddik katama yifrach, the tzaddikim are taking the divine light of Hashem and letting that divine light be the energy that's fueling their lives. And what is it that their task is in the world? is the sweetening of the judgments. How do those judgments get sweetened? And in a way, this is coming back to the same discussion that we had last week. How do we sweeten the judgments? How can we see the struggles as opportunities, or how can we see them in a different way? And in a time, and I think we're coming into a time more and more now where things are confusing, it's a lot of strange things going on all the time. How can we see things in a different way so that we can penetrate somehow to a sense of emunah, even in experiences of struggle and darkness? And I don't have an answer how to do that, but that is the task of the tzaddikim, the hamtakat hadinim, to transform the struggles into opportunities, to see what's buried in certain hardships and difficulties. If, Einstein, I think, said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and thinking that you're going to get a different result. So if something, some path or some lifestyle or some, situation is constantly not feeling like it's nourishing or nurturing or positive, how can one seek out a more positive and constructive way of being so that one can generate or one can perceive or one can unravel or one can uncover a sweetness in a situation that doesn't seem so sweet? So I'm not sure how to do that, but there is a part of the continuation of this idea that connected to the rain, this blessing that comes from our activities, our connection, our plugging in, our connecting to the source, our being grateful, our acknowledging, our saying the brachot, we bring down some kind of beneficence, the rain being the symbol of that. And that in the time to come, it says in Zechariah, in the future, a river will flow out of the temple and will sweeten all the waters in the world, that all physicality will become a perfect vessel for spirituality, and the life-giving waters of material well-being will flow from the Holy Land and will be transformed, and the Holy Land will be transformed into an orchard of delight. How does this vision of Zechariah come about? So I just am thinking again of one of the worst parshiot of all the curses and terrible curses, many, many curses in one of the parshiot. And it says at the end, all these curses came upon the Jewish people because they didn't serve Hashem with joy. How do you serve Hashem with joy in the midst of suffering and struggle? Somehow I feel, and I know that I'm speaking from a place of privilege and a place where I'm not experiencing a tremendous amount of lack, thank God, Baruch Hashem. But from what I'm understanding from spiritual law and spiritual rules are that when we're grateful and joyful about anything at all, it brings more joy and more blessing in our lives. And if we find any reason at all to be positive and to be joyful, whether it's, the smallest amount of time of dancing or writing a gratitude thing, but not doing it as an exercise, but really trying to feel it, looking at something that would make one feel happy, looking at the view, looking at a flower, looking at something, watching a happy movie, watching a comedy show, doing anything you can to have an experience of joy and positivity. From what I understand about spiritual rules and laws, that somehow brings more of a positive. And when we're feeling fearful, and anxious and worried about the future, and I'll repeat that, fearful, anxious, and worried, then that very anxiety and the very worry pushes away more blessing from coming. So when Hashem says, I want you to serve me with joy and trust and simcha, there is an aspect like in the man to trust that good things will come. And every time we're fearful and anxious because we're feeling that we're in a place of lack, I think that possibly can act as a barrier to more positive things coming. And I know it's easy to say, but I think that is, in a way, almost more important than doing all the rules and keeping all the halachas. Not to say that those are not important. Those are important, but I think the real spiritual work is to somehow find places every day of joy, real joy, to be grateful and to open and to make it a task every day. What can I look for? What can I do? What can I, even if I take a walk, even if I go buy a flower, even if I, look for something, go visit a pet store, look at the budgies, I don't know, whatever it is. What can I do to have a positive moment? And I think that will bring more positivity. So that's wrapping up my little delivery. So I'm ready to take questions. And I see Shalomit raised her hand. There's such a cute thing, that little yellow hand that comes up on the screen. I didn't really see it until you used that function. So yes, so question.
Well, not a question as much as just a confirmation from science. I don't know how many people are on the call. I never do. But there's something called the double. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Perfectly well.
Okay. There's something called the double slit experiment, which was done by scientists, and they had two surfaces. And the first surface, they had two slits, and they threw basically photons, light, molecules. Anyway, and they threw it through to the second surface. And the second surface sometimes showed up as a scatter, and then other times would show up as two slits. And what they learned is that when they put something there that was like an observer, that was counting the photons, they got the two slits. And when they didn't, they got the scatter. And the implications of that are huge in terms of how our consciousness co-creates with reality, which I'm going to say is the capital R of God, to result in the small reality, right? The reality with a small r, the conventional reality that each of us has. And the power of our consciousness and how we mirror what our consciousness is putting out vibrationally, showing up in that experiment, confirms what you were saying, which is, serve God with joy. Find a way to find joy. And it's, for me, of course, as is for, I think, almost everybody at this point, is a very, it's a challenge. It's a great challenge because we get seduced by the reality with a small r, by everything that's going on with news and all the stuff around us politically and so on. It pulls us away from our center, from our connected knowing that we are of the divine. And we lose that moment. We lose that knowing. And then thanks to Torah, thanks to, other spiritual understandings or whatever, however the person gets back, they find their way, sometimes claw their way back into a unity experience again. And from that place of unity, there's always joy. There's always an immediate smile. There's a knowing that all is good. But it's a constant dance, at least for me, it's a constant dance. And so hearing you like that, absolutely, that serving with joy is the wisest thing that we need to be doing. And the challenge is to do it.
Right. Well,
So, and I just wanted to share the scientific confirmation
yeah.
of that ancient understanding.
So that is really beautiful, and I'm really happy that you shared that. And I'll just repeat something from the reality of what saying blessings. We have this halacha, or as well custom, practice is the word I'm looking for. Practice that before we eat everything, we say a blessing on it. And it's interesting because what are we doing with that blessing as we holding on to the food, or even a mitzvah we're going to do, or something we're going to do? We forced to kind of connect to the source of that thing.
Yeah.
And when we connect to the source of that thing, we connect to the fact that from that source is an abundance that more of that thing will come. So we're not only blessing on the thing, but we're blessing on the source of more. And it's interesting because in the summer, we studied the story of Balak, the king Balak, and he was very threatened by the Jewish people. He heard that they had fought some wars and that they had been victorious. And it says he got very afraid that they were going to come and kind of, it's a disgusting use of phrase, what they were going to do. They were going to come and kind of, the Jewish people would take all the vegetation and gobble it up, like from the mouth of an ox, like pull the grass out by its roots, so there wouldn't even be roots left in the ground. That's how consuming of the resources the Jewish people would be. And he was so paranoid and so jealous and so in small mind that he had to find a way to control and contain this danger of this people, that he hired Bilam to curse them. And it's very interesting because he was coming from small mind where there's not enough resources from everyone. He was coming from this idea of, I'm threatened, I'm envious, I'm jealous, there's not enough. So when you're in that mind, all you have is fear of the opposite of scarcity mentality. And then he's trying to cut the Jews off from their source. And then really Bilam ends up blessing them and giving them blessings, which led us to discuss what is a blessing. And a blessing is, the definition of a blessing is that you constantly connect to the source, constantly connecting to the source. And when you connect it to the source, there's always abundance. There's always a solution. There's always a new way of doing something, that even if you're single and you didn't get married and you didn't have children and your life didn't go the way you think and you're alone and you're miserable, if you connect to the source, then there is an abundance available to you that will flow down and show and illuminate your circumstance to be an opportunity for something, somehow. But if you're constantly feeling cursed and miserable that it didn't go the way you should, then there's no room for you to bring down that abundance, because you're constantly reinforcing your separation from source. And so that prevents you from experiencing the abundance. And the way to connect to that source is not in a state of fear, but in a state of joy, because you're trusting that somehow in the darkness, in the constriction, is an opportunity. But the trick is that if you don't trust that there's opportunity and you don't look for the joy, then you don't get that opportunity. It's almost like there's a big balloon of blessing hung up in the sky, and in order to penetrate that balloon and let the nectar flow down onto you, making you all nice and sticky with its goodness, you have to be besimcha. You have to be joyful. You have to be in a place of, there's good here. I'm not seeing it. I don't understand it, but I want to see it, and I'm going to find it. Maybe I'm free to travel. Maybe I don't have responsibilities. I don't have to be home to cook a meal for husband and children who are I'm free, I can explore, I can travel, I can go, I don't have to feel only the negativity of my situation, and that will unlock the blessing. And if you're constantly reinforcing to yourself how terrible, terrible, terrible your situation is, then you're almost like Balak, who's saying, I'm envious of the Jewish people. They're going to take my grass. They're going to take my resources. They won their war against Melech, Bashan, whoever, Og, and I can only feel envious. I can only feel bad. There's not enough for me here. And then then all you can do is curse. He cursed the Jewish people. And the opposite is to hook into this, balloon of blessing through joy, through optimism, that even though it doesn't feel good, it doesn't seem good, it's not what I thought, that there must be a best case scenario opportunity. And that's what unleashes the blessing. That's what unleashes the blessing. So Shalomit, thank you for adding in your scientific validation of that. And we've gone over time. So just to reiterate that this is, we were talking about the 7 species, and that the date one is the one that's equal to Malchut. Malchut is where we're trying to go with Mashiach, with ultimate, where we're leading. And that is the very, very sweet, fruit that just sucks in and soaks in the Shemesh. The value of date, Tamar and Shemesh, sun, is 640. And then the comparison of the tzaddikim to the date palm. And what is the joy of the job of the tzaddikim? The sweetening of the dinim, the sweetening of the judgments. How do they sweeten the judgments? Transforming struggles into opportunities. That is the work, that is the righteous, that's the sweetness of the date, that it transforms the dinim, the judgments, which can be very harsh. It's a harsh judgment not to have family, not to have children, not to have a husband. That's a harsh judgment. But the tzaddik, the date palm, the sweetness of the date is somehow transferring it into an opportunity. And that's in the transformation will come the revelation of more blessing. So I want to bless. I want to bless.
I want to ask you just one small question.
Sure.
You said that Hayav Hodev Yehiyeh is one of Hashem's names.
Yes.
I never heard.
Yes. So when
the whole thing is his name.
So when Hashem was speaking to Moshe, I believe it's from the burning bush, and Moshe said, "By which name should I tell the Jews that I've been called to come in and redeem them?" I think then Hashem said, "I am, I was, I am, I always will be." I think that's when that's one of the ways that Hashem is Yahoveh v'Yihiyeh. Yeah, I think it's from there.
I thought that was just like a characteristic of Hashem. I didn't know that was officially one of the names.
Well, it is an amazing thing because it's defining Hashem's name as the great is, the great isness. And, I think Byron Katie made $1 million writing a book called Loving What Is, right? God is what is. I am, I was, I will be. I am is. That's who I am. I am reality as it is. Love me for what it is, not for what you wish it will be, should have been, might have been, but you got to love me for what is. I am, I was, I am, I always will be. Loving.
But what about, but you have to feel loved by Hashem, and you know what I mean? There's the brain, and then there's the emotions. And if you can't turn off, just the way Hashem says that you should love him. Diane said it today. It's like a little bit of exhausting to make someone love you. It's even harder to make yourself love Hashem or feel like he loves you when you feel hurt. When you spend your life year after year after year loving, and you don't feel loved. So it's a very, very complicated thing. There's things that what you're saying, of course it's true, but if you feel unloved, it's not, or abandoned. Like, real emotions are real emotions. So that's all I'm saying. I just wanted to add that, because it's very nice what you're saying, and don't think that I haven't already stockpiled on and done all these things already,
So
because I have.
I
Well, what's it called? The children and the people that I'm taking care of, all they see are like smiles and emotional support and everything. For me, you can ask my patient, but you can't, because she can't talk. She's special needs and she has a trach in her neck. But she loves me. She loves me. She's so happy. I make her laugh.
The thing about waiting.
This is not being recorded, right?
Well, I can turn it off. I can turn it. I do appreciate that when you say bracha, all of the things you're saying about loving Hashem, and I want to feel that Hashem is loving me. So I just want to address that, because I think that sometimes when we think about Hashem loving us and we feeling in a place of despair, or we feel we haven't been answered or we haven't been seen, it's very apt. It's, what does it mean, to serve Hashem with simcha, or to love Hashem, or to be waiting for Hashem to love you and to feel like sort of abandoned? Those are very unpleasant feelings. But I think that there is a kind of spiritual work, avoda, where we see Hashem's love and we kind of imbibe it in a way, regardless of what our personal circumstances are. And that's a madrega, a level where you get to, where you're sort of happy regardless of circumstance. Now, this is a very high level, but you see the sun shining, you see a flower blooming, you see, beautiful view, an ocean, and you start to tune into the fact that God is loving you through the universe, through your breath, through your very life. And it's sort of a cultivating of a state of being within yourself that you sort of manifest, and in your manifesting it outwards, you start to feel it inwards. And it's not an easy thing to do, because if you're feeling ungrateful, or you're feeling unhappy, or you're feeling badly about your circumstances, and then you want to feel remembered by Hashem, it's complicated, because in a way we kind of co-create our reality with how we're experiencing him, and how we're experiencing the God factor in the world, and how we're experiencing love in the world. And I think that it's something to work on, to just keep expanding our appreciation and our ability to feel joy and to feel gratitude, and to feel that we can open that part of ourselves and that aspect of ourselves, our heart, that even though it's hurt, we speak in this week's parsha about circumcising the heart, even though we hurt, we feel abandoned, we feel unloved, that actually Hashem is loving us, just not in the way we expected, and that somehow we have to remove that circumcision of our heart, that we can feel it. So I'll end with that and wrap it up and say that I don't know if that's conclusive or that's comprehensive, but that's what I have for now. And I thank you for listening. And
I don't think you're in a position to even
wish
tell me.
everybody has a beautiful Shabbos.